Big Mike here. Welcome back to My History of Comics, a video series about growing up reading, collecting, and still enjoying comic books. Today I'm going to talk about the X-Men for the second time. This is part 2 of my history with the X-Men. Now, this volume, Essential X-Men Volume 4, contains the comics drawn by the X-Men artist who I would consider my favorite, Paul Smith. What do I like about Paul Smith? Well, for one thing, he's a fantastic action artist. Here's a scene of Wolverine fighting the Silver Samurai. And he did that kind of widescreen paneled thing you see where it's horizontal panels across the page. In this case, it worked. In some artists' case, especially lately, not so much. And he wasn't the first one to do this by any means. In fact, John Byrne, everyone else's favorite X-Men artist, did it quite a bit too, but he would usually draw one or two widescreen panels and the rest would be broken up a bit. Paul Smith, though, just focused solely on giving that cinematic effect the best way he could. I've always been a fan of this fight. You can practically feel what's going on with each character. And Chris Claremont didn't put too many word balloons in it. Very unusual from Mr. Claremont. I've only really seen him do that when Frank Miller drew the first Wolverine limited series, which was published and possibly made at about the same time as this issue. Chris Claremont, he is one of the wordiest comic book writers ever. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you can just kind of read his prose and it can get a little bit purple, but that's okay. It usually has a pretty good flow. In this case, he thought, well, all I'm going to do is just clutter this stuff up, so forget it. I'm just going to let the pictures tell the story, and again, he doesn't make that decision with too many artists, and it really serves the action in this case. He's also very good with the splash pages, not that he did a ton, but here's Madeline Pryor dressed up as Phoenix, and, the cliffhanger there had the Dark Phoenix thing possessed Cyclops' wife, who isn't identical to Jean Grey's previous love. X-Men comics are notoriously convoluted in their continuity, and even in the early 80s that was starting to take form, but that's a beautiful, beautiful shot. Here we have Mohawk Storm, as I think of her. Storm's personality underwent a change, and so did her look. She became actually an interesting character in a way that I don't think she really was before this, and in a lot of cases wasn't after this. But this Storm, take charge, kind of in touch with her dark side just a little bit, but still undoubtedly heroic, is my favorite version of the character. In fact, she lost her powers for a while when she looked like this, and still managed to lead the X-Men. I like that they could put a character like this, a woman, African-American, at the forefront, like it was no big deal, have her lose her powers, and she was still the coolest character in the room. I'm pretty sure this design was actually done as a joke by Paul Smith when they wanted to redesign Storm, but somebody really liked it, and so he said, fine. I also find it funny how early 80s comics would try to incorporate punk looks, and not quite get it. But again, this look for me has always worked. Some people don't like it, but this is by far my favorite version of this character, Storm. Paul Smith did the quiet scenes well, too. Here are Kitty Pryde and Peter Rasputin, better known as Colossus. And they were kind of in this burgeoning relationship that didn't really go anywhere, sputtered out, and then eventually got reignited in the early 2000s. But again, I think sputtered out quickly after that. Everyone seems to like the idea of Kitty and Peter, but nobody can make it stick. But anyway, Paul Smith could do great things with body language. He gave the characters a lot of personality with their faces. He really was the total package in terms of action, drama, humor. And I like how everything is just always so smooth. So that makes him my favorite artist to tackle the X-Men on a regular basis. He only drew about 10 or 11 issues, unfortunately, before taking off, but they're gems. Going back a bit, we find Neal Adams, the last artist to have an extended stint on the series before it was retooled in the mid-70s. Before, in fact, it went to reprints before that. And Neal Adams, if you don't know who he is, he's well known for bringing reality to comic book art. I mean, reality in quotes. He made figures look less cartoony. And that became a trend in the 70s. A lot of Neal Adams imitators. I believe this is Carl Lycos. Yeah, the guy who turns into Sauron. But anyway, you can kind of see there's depth, there's shading, there's solidity to the figures. It's not necessarily a better way to draw comics, but it was definitely semi-revolutionary at the time. And again, you saw a lot of imitators in the 70s, or people who were inspired by his work. He got very experimental with his layouts. Here's Sauron, kind of a humanoid pterosaur, with hypnotic powers, super strength, etc. But, embedded within the creature himself are flashbacks, kind of like a film strip. And there's Angel in the worst costume he ever had up in the corner. Anyway, people weren't generally doing this stuff. I mean, most comic book artists, it was panel to panel to panel. Here he was unafraid to kind of break the plane, rearrange things in a new way. He would often break the plane of the panel. I mean, again, here it's almost like Magneto is an apparel behind Lorelei. That's the woman going, ooh. Anyway, he wasn't the only one. Gene Colan started drawing outside panel borders a lot. Jack Kirby would put all sorts of techniques, including collage and just putting splash pages, full-size pages wherever he wanted. Jim Steranko would incorporate a lot of pop art at this time. But Neal Adams definitely was another one of those innovators who, again, his drawings were often just very pleasing to the eye. And he drew X-Men for, 8, 9 issues? There they are getting ready, each with their own thoughts. Mostly, all of them except for one maybe written by Roy Thomas. He didn't create Alex Summers, but he designed the costume for Havoc. There's the Beast getting a little mad, or as he puts it, extremely perturbed. And just his art was pretty revolutionary. Reportedly, sales picked up, but they didn't have the sales reports to determine just how much they picked up, so they hedged their bets, and X-Men became a reprint book. And Neal Adams went on to other things at DC. He's probably best known for his work on Batman and the Green Lantern, Green Arrow series, in which the team of those two heroes tackled social issues. There's good old Professor X, looking kind of evil and bizarre in that picture. But Neal Adams' run on X-Men was actually extremely influential for Claremont, Byrne, and everyone who came after, too. And then there's the 90s. Here it is, X-Men Volume 2, Number 1, drawn by Jim Lee. I actually got it signed by Mr. Lee when I met him at a convention. Very, very nice guy. Jim Lee became the most popular and imitated artist in the 90s. He became known for the splash paginess of his art. Not to say that he couldn't do panel to panel, but he was always big on the big moment. And the little stuff wasn't as important, might get lost in the shuffle. Not always. Again, there's some excellent X-Men comics that Jim Lee drew. Drew the men extremely buff. I don't think Magneto has ever been as muscular as he is here. Cyclops either, for that matter. Remember when that character's nickname was Slim? Anyway, and the women. He generally drew the women with extremely long legs and extremely big breasts and extremely small waists. Unfortunately, that's kind of persisted. So, the Psylocke, the character in the purple bathing suit type thing, became kind of notorious for taking a character and pushing away everything that made her unique or entertaining and just making her kind of eye candy. There's a few Jim Lee pages that are, probably very popular among a certain fan set, but, there's one I remember of Psylocke coming out of a lake and pushing her hair back and she looks like she's in a Victoria's Secret commercial. Rogue used to cover her whole body head to toe with kind of bulky clothing, And then all of a sudden she's wearing the skin tight, still covered all the way, but skin tight. Oh yeah, the big hair. It was, coming off the end of the 80s. What are you going to do? Storm, remember Mohawk Storm? Well, this is not Mohawk Storm. This is Jim Lee Storm. Jean Grey there too. Who, again, same body as all the other women. Not a trend I can say I'm a fan of, but that's not to deny that there was this kind of forward-thrusting dynamism in Jim Lee's look. And if you like stuff, if you like superhero clothes, you should be superhero clothes. When I was in this particular night, I was 13, and it was the biggest, best-selling comic in history. Mostly because it had these stories on the cover. This is Fifth Variant, actually, that they linked them all together. Anyway, but you can't deny that Jim Lee plus X-Men was something that Kate Myers really, really, really liked. With his main inker, Scott Williams, you got lots and lots of lines, little squiggly lines going kind of everywhere. So, just look at Wolverine's leg, all those vertical lines going down. His arm too. I'm not sure exactly what they signify, but hey, I really thought it looked cool. There's Gambit. Some people really like Gambit. I'm not one of those people. I don't think he's an irredeemable character by any means, but I always thought he was trying too hard to be cool, or the writers rather, and the artists were trying too hard to make him cool. When I don't think it really worked. So yeah, Jim Lee's art dominated the 90s. They got artists who drew somewhere in that wheelhouse, not exactly imitators. But then all of a sudden, these artists who drew like they drew Japanese manga kind of became the thing. Joe Madureira was the most popular of them, and I apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. Everything kind of got big and inflated and exaggerated in a slightly different way. Gone were the 20 billion lines per square inch, and in was just kind of, everything got a little puffed up, I guess, for lack of a better word. Anyway, this comic actually, X-Men Alpha, kicked off the Age of Apocalypse storyline, the most popular storyline of the X-Men in the 90s, an alternate universe in which Professor X is assassinated and Apocalypse, the villain, rises to take over. X-Men comics of the 90s weren't particularly well written overall, not to say that they all weren't. And so a lot of that was the editorial mandate to keep things moving but never tie anything up. So it could get frustrating as a reader, but the Age of Apocalypse story was kind of a sprawling, gigantic one and done. The interiors of this issue were by Roger Cruz, who at the time kind of imitated the manga-esque stuff that was out there. In particular, Joe Madureira. His art seemed to be Roger Cruz's main source of guidance and inspiration. But yeah, there he is. It's, like I said, you get that total exaggeration. I mean, Apocalypse actually there's an excuse. The guy can shift shape and whatnot. But look how big those arms are, and those what is that, an 8-pack that goes all the way up to his chest. But hey, everybody, we ate it up. And I should note that Roger Cruz recently drew the I believe it was called X-Men First Class, not to be confused with a movie of the same name, but Adventures of the Original 5 X-Men. And he did not use the style, and it looked pretty good. So I'm glad he kind of got away from this, but again, this was the other big trend in X-Men art in the 90s. And that's where I'm going to leave X-Men Part 2. I guess there will be a Part 3, because I really want to show you guys some X-Men comics that I really liked, that again, were after that, and some of them being pretty far off the beaten path. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.